I also want to now speak to Steve Gill, who is a former advisor to both the Clinton and Bush administrations. Steve, you're very welcome to talkTV. Good morning.
Good morning, Peter. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. It's fascinating that Donald Trump was talking there about a rigged and stolen election. He says he's done absolutely nothing wrong. Prosecutors obviously disagree. What do you make of it?
Well, keep in mind that this is a DA, a district attorney in a county in Georgia that has about a million people in the county. It is a definitively Democrat county. This is a Democrat-elected DA. A Democrat-elected judge, a Democrat-elected sheriff. So this has all the earmarks of a partisan persecution, particularly since, as President Trump pointed out, he challenged the credibility of the election results in Georgia. And there are a lot of questions that have been raised. None have been adjudicated. For example, one of the problems that they had in the election count in this particular county is that at one point they shut down the vote count because of a supposed water break leak in the building where it was taking place, except there had been like a toilet overflow 10 hours earlier when this water burst, pipe supposedly burst. They had the Republican observers of the election count dismissed while Democrats continued to count and perhaps recount ballots. The question in this case, and this is one of the weakest of the cases, I think, against Donald Trump, is whether or not he had any belief that the election had been overturned, whether he had the requisite intent to try and overturn the election without any basis. And I think there's going to be plenty of proof that's going to be shown as we move forward in this particular case that he did believe that this thing had been rigged, at least in Georgia and perhaps in some of the other states where it was very close. And it's going to be difficult, I think, if they ever get to a trial with a legitimate judge, a legitimate jury, to actually do anything with him. I don't think it's ever going to get there. I think this case is going to get removed to federal court. I think because he was actually president at the time. When you look at some of the other co-conspirators who've been indicted, I think there are 19 people total in this one charge by this partisan district attorney. When you look at the facts, they were all in their federal government capacity and will probably be moved to our federal court, not tried in this actual partisan state court action.
But wasn't it pretty straightforward in terms of what Donald Trump said, that he needed to find many thousands of votes, that he asked the person on the other end of the line to find votes? Hasn't he, perhaps to the ears of many, done something wrong here?
Yeah, I think it's how that is taken out of context. He was saying basically, I need you to find 18,300 votes. And the reason for that number is that that's how many they were down at that point. But there were hundreds of thousands of votes that were questioned. So his point, I think, was not go create 18,300 votes, but
it certainly sounded that way to a number of people. It sounded that way to a number of people, Steve, though. I mean, he could have expressed himself more precisely within that, and to many people, they just see that as a pretty open and shut case.
Yeah, I think absolutely the way it's being presented by the district attorney. But, you know, there's an old saying in the United States that a district attorney can indict a ham sandwich if they want. The particular grand jury in this case had a woman who was literally at one point giggling and laughing about how cool it would be to actually get to put Donald Trump under oath. You had not only a partisan district attorney, but a grand jury that was only given one side of the story. And for example, Mark Meadows, who was the president's chief of staff in the White House at this time, made a phone call to a congressman in Pennsylvania asking for the phone numbers of two legislative leaders in Arizona. He's been indicted for that phone call. Another aide has been indicted for setting up a conference room so that President Trump could meet with some legislative leaders. Those kind of things being criminalized, I think, underlines how this case is beyond the pale.
It's really interesting. We've had a text in from Andy and Thatcham, a really interesting point here, very pithily put, where he says Fannie Willis is a money can't buy Trump election campaigner. And actually, when we look at the results, Andy's absolutely right, isn't he? Because no matter what they throw at Donald Trump, 91 separate charges and 4 separate indictments, nonetheless, he is becoming more and more popular and more likely to be the Republican candidate in the 2024 presidential election.
You can already buy a T-shirt from the Trump campaign for like $25 that has the mugshot on the T-shirt. My concern, Peter, is that American politicians might misread the fact that every time another indictment comes down, Trump's poll numbers go up. These guys are going to start robbing convenience stores to have their own crime wave in order to see if their poll numbers will go up. I think they would be misleading and misreading the results of this sort of impact. The American people see the persecution that these cases are, that it is about the weaponization of the Justice Department here, our own FBI.
It is fascinating. A lot of people here in the UK, we, for better or worse, in our justice system absolutely is not perfect. But there aren't too many judges who are seen as political figures. But you're talking about the district attorney, you're talking about the sheriff, you're talking about judges in that county that are all democratically elected. There are many Republican judges as well. And that kind of partisan nature of the justice system is just not something we're used to here. Is it worse or better, do you think, in this instance? Is this a sort of hyper-politicised system, or are there systems where justice can be, where Donald Trump would get a fair trial from a Democratic judge, do you think?
I'm not sure there are many places, because we have this hyper-partisan situation where Democrats and Republicans are on such far edges. For example, one of the cases in Washington, D.C. is in a city where 95% of the population voted against Donald Trump. There's no way you can get a fair jury, if they're going to have a jury trial, to determine whether Donald Trump broke the law when 95% of the folks there voted against him. And the locally elected district attorney there, the judge there, are opposing any effort to move it to a more balanced and fair system. So I think it is going to be a challenge to get a fair trial. I think, unfortunately, for the prosecutors and the persecutors in this case, courts of appeals, legitimate judges outside that elected scheme, are going to be making the decisions on most of these cases before they ever get close to a trial.
Okay, thank you very, very much indeed. Steve Gill there, former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations.